The rain poured over the cracked lands of Texas, like the sky itself was weeping for her. Emily staggered down the dirt road, clutching a tattered shawl around her shoulders, her bare feet sinking into the mud. Behind her, the echo of her husband's voice still clawed at her memory, cruel, bitter words that cut deeper than any wound. He had called her worthless. He had struck her for the last time, screaming that she had cursed his bloodline by giving him daughters instead of sons. 3 little girls, innocent, fragile and pure, and yet, in his eyes, they were a punishment. She had shielded them with her body that night as the blows rained down, taking every hit in silence. But when the morning came, she knew she couldn't stay. She gathered her children, wrapped them in the only blanket she owned, and slipped out the door into the cold dawn, her heart pounding with fear and determination. Each step away from that house felt like stepping out of one life and into another. Uncertain but free, the rain turned to sleet as she reached the old trail leading toward the hills. Her strength was fading, her arms heavy from carrying her youngest child. The others stumbled beside her, their small hands clinging to her dress. The world around her was grey and endless. She hadn't eaten in 2 days and her breath came out in gasps. Still, she whispered to them, "Mama's gonna find a safe place. Just a little longer. Babies." She didn't notice the figure on horseback watching from the ridge. A tall man with a worn hat, dark coat, and eyes that carried the weight of solitude. His name was Jacob Mercer, a rancher known around the valley for keeping to himself ever since his wife passed 3 winters ago. He had built his ranch with his own hands. His only company, the cattle, the cold, and the ghost of a family he once dreamed of having. He wasn't a man who interfered in other people's troubles, but something about the sight of that woman, trudging through the storm with 3 little girls, stopped him cold. Jacob spurred his horse forward, the snow kicking up behind him. As he got closer, he saw the bruises on her face, the cuts on her arms, the way she tried to hide her pain behind a trembling smile for her daughters. "Ma'am," he said gently, pulling his horse to a stop beside her. "You're gonna freeze out here." "Where are you headed?" She looked up at him with a mix of fear and pride, clutching her children tighter. "Anywhere but there," she whispered. He could tell she didn't want pity. She wanted peace. Something in his chest ached, a feeling he thought he'd buried long ago. He reached down his gloved hand, his voice firm but kind. "You're coming with me." She hesitated, her eyes wide. "Why?" she asked softly. "Because no one deserves to walk through hell alone," he replied. Without another word, he dismounted, wrapped his coat around her shoulders, and lifted her children one by one onto the horse. The youngest began to cry, but he smiled gently and said, "Don't you worry, little one. You're safe now." They rode through the storm to his ranch, a wooden cabin standing proud against the white wilderness. Emily could hardly believe a stranger would offer shelter, but as the fire crackled and warmth returned to her hands, she saw the way he looked at her children, not with judgment, but with a quiet tenderness. He fed them, bandaged her wounds, and gave her a place by the fire. That night, as the storm raged outside, she sat watching her daughters sleep beside the hearth. For the first time in a long time, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever, hope. And as she glanced at Jacob, sitting silently at the table, his weathered hands folded and his eyes staring into the flames, she realized he wasn't saving her out of charity. He was saving her because he, too, was lost. The house that had once been silent was now filled with the soft breathing of children and the fragile heartbeat of something new beginning. The days that followed were hard, but they were no longer hopeless. Jacob's ranch stretched wide beneath the winter sky, miles of snow-covered fences, barns heavy with hay, and the low hum of cattle braving the cold. Emily worked beside him, her hands blistered and raw, but her heart strong. She had never known kindness from a man, and yet here was one who asked for nothing in return. Jacob spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. He built her a small room next to his own and told her it was hers as long as she needed it. Her daughters laughed for the first time in months, chasing the ranch dogs through the yard. Each laugh echoed across the land like music to a soul that had forgotten what joy felt like. One morning, Jacob found Emily standing by the fence, her hair loose in the wind, her eyes fixed on the rising sun. "You plan on staying long?" he asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "I don't know what I plan anymore," she said. "I just know I'm not afraid to breathe here." Jacob looked at her, and in that moment he saw everything he'd ever wanted. Not beauty, not perfection, but courage. "Then breathe all you want," he said. "This land's big enough for all of us." From that day on, he made it his silent vow to protect them, not because they needed saving, but because they deserved a chance to heal. But the past has a way of finding you. One evening, as the sky burned red with sunset, a figure appeared at the edge of the property. Her husband. He rode in furious, shouting her name. Jacob stepped out onto the porch, his stance unshaken, his eyes hard. "She's not yours to hurt anymore," he said, his voice calm but cold as iron. The man laughed. "You think you can take my wife?" Jacob's jaw tightened. "No, I'm not taking her. She already left you. You just couldn't stand losing what you broke." The man raised his hand as if to strike. But before he could take another step, Jacob's hand was on his revolver. "Try it," he said quietly, "and you'll never raise a hand to anyone again." The silence that followed was heavy as thunder. The man turned his horse and rode off into the dark, his pride shattered. Emily stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her cheeks, not of fear, but of freedom. That night, Jacob sat by the fire, his hat in his hands, unsure what to say. Emily came to him, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to do that for me." He looked up, eyes glimmering in the firelight. "I didn't do it for you," he said. "I did it with you, because no one stands alone here." She reached out, her hand brushing his. In that touch was everything: gratitude, trust, and a promise of something more. Spring came slowly, melting away the snow and the pain of the past. The ranch came alive again. The laughter of children, the rhythm of hooves, the quiet companionship of two souls learning to love after loss. Jacob built a swing for the girls, and every evening he'd watch them play as Emily hung laundry on the line, sunlight warming her face. Sometimes he'd catch her looking at him, and she'd smile that shy, thankful smile that said more than words ever could. He knew then that he wasn't just a lonely rancher anymore. He was something greater, a man who had found his reason to live again, not in riches or pride, but in the simple grace of giving someone a home. And when the girls would run to him, calling Papa, he'd lift them high into the air, his laughter echoing across the land like the sound of a heart reborn. And to everyone listening, watching, or reading this, remember this: kindness can change a life. Sometimes one brave act, one open door, or one gentle word can rewrite a person's entire story. So if you believe in second chances, in love that heals, and in the power of good hearts, subscribe and stay with us, because stories like this remind us what it means to be human.